always thought my marriage was fine. Yes, like any other couple, we argued sometimes, but it was never about anything serious. Our arguments usually stemmed from small things like me forgetting to buy milk or him not closing the fridge door properly. These things never made me doubt our love for each other. After all, we still loved each other, and I always thought my husband was trustworthy. However, everything I thought about our marriage changed in an instant, a moment I can never forget. This weekend, as usual, we decided to buy an iPad for our son. He was so excited to receive this gift, but mostly, my husband and I wanted to provide a useful tool for him. My husband set up the iPad for him, downloaded some games he liked, and we thought it would be a great gift to encourage him to learn and have fun. Our son spent the whole day playing with the iPad, laughing and chatting happily. That scene made me feel at ease and happy, because we were a small family full of love. However, the story started to change the next evening when my phone suddenly ran out of battery at a time I needed it. I was very frustrated with this mishap because I wanted to write a shopping list. I thought of using our son's iPad and decided to replace my phone with it. Our son was playing games, so I just needed to open the device, write the list, and send it to myself via AirDrop once my phone was charged. But when I opened the iPad, I noticed something unusual. The device had synchronized all the notes from my husband's phone. Normally, I wouldn't have paid attention to this since I knew he didn't hide anything from me. But when I saw the most recent note, I couldn't help but feel curious. It was written at 3:32 a.m., a time when I had never seen him stay up so late. The note began with the name Vivian. Surely, this was a misunderstanding, I thought. I tried to convince myself that it was just a harmless note, but I couldn't stop reading. The more I read, the more I felt a strange, inexplicable anxiety. The note described his feelings for a woman named Vivian, and the words I read were so intense that I couldn't stop. This wasn't just an ordinary note, it was a passionate confession. He wrote about his emotions for her, thanking her for talking sense into him, and even said he was ready to commit to Vivian, even if that made him the bad guy in everyone else's eyes. The feeling in me at that moment was indescribable. Each word echoed in my head, freezing me in place. Why would he write this? I couldn't understand. I always thought we had a happy life, so why was there another woman coming between us? After reading the note, I felt my mind spin. The words in my husband's message felt like a slap in the face. The things he had written were impossible for me to believe. How had I not noticed what was happening all this time? Had he been deceiving me for a long time? Questions swirled around me like a dark cloud, impossible to shake off. I tried to calm myself. After all, this was just a note, right? Maybe it was just a moment of weakness, a fleeting emotion, nothing serious. But why would he write these words? And why at 3:32 a.m.? Wasn't that too suspicious? I felt like I was being pushed into a battle I had never anticipated. Doubts and unexplainable feelings rose up inside me. How could I continue living like this when my husband was sending such words to another woman? At that moment, I wanted to call him, ask him what was going on. But I couldn't. He was in Japan on a business trip. Moreover, I knew I couldn't face the truth if he wasn't ready to talk. This only made me feel like I was in a maze with no way out. For the entire week, I could only stand by and watch my life slowly fall apart, unable to do anything. I looked at the iPad again, and once more, I felt a strange confusion. This was the device we had set up for our son where he would learn and explore the world. But now, it had become evidence of a secret I never imagined I would uncover. How could I talk to my husband about this when he wasn't here, not here to explain everything? A feeling of helplessness overwhelmed me. I knew I couldn't do anything until he returned, but inside, I couldn't stop asking, did he really love me the way I thought? Could we get through this? How much had our relationship been shaken that he would even think of committing to another woman? Every question, every doubt, made the pain even worse. I wondered whether I could wait until he came back to confront him, or if I wouldn't be able to stay silent any longer. But I knew that no matter what, I couldn't continue living in this chaos. I needed to know the truth, even if it was something I didn't want to hear. The next few days, I lived in a tension I couldn't describe. Every time I looked at the iPad, my heart would tighten. The anxiety and worry clung to me. I tried to stay calm, to go on with life as if nothing had happened. But every night, thoughts of the name Vivian kept flooding my mind. I knew he wouldn't be able to answer if I called, because his work in Japan was very busy. But I couldn't just sit still anymore. I felt like I was trapped in a story I never wanted to be a part of, but now I couldn't escape. Why hadn't he told me? Why hide it, making me feel like a fool? These questions twisted in my mind day and night, and there was no way to shut them out. On the third day since I discovered the note, I decided to do something I never thought I would do. I had to check his phone. No, I didn't want to do this, but at this point, I had no other choice. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I told myself I would only check the messages once, and then I wouldn't bother him again. I secretly went into our bedroom when he wasn't home, and I took his phone from his desk. My heart pounded as I opened the screen and began scrolling through the apps. Each time I opened an app, it felt like I was about to face a storm. Messages, emails, missed calls. There was nothing out of the ordinary. But when I opened the Notes app, I almost couldn't breathe. Another note had been saved, this time not about Vivian, but a long conversation between him and her. My eyes quickly scanned each line. This time, he didn't just talk about his feelings for Vivian. He expressed regret about their past, the reasons they couldn't be together, and the promises he made to her. He even wrote that he had always felt constrained by family and responsibilities, and that he wanted to live authentically, free from society's or family's judgment. These words made me feel like I was being dragged down into a bottomless pit, unable to escape. The more I read, the more I felt pulled into a whirlwind I couldn't control. Everything I had once believed about him, about our family, suddenly shattered. How could he hide this from me so expertly? How could he love another woman and still live with me, when I thought we had a happy family? I felt like I couldn't breathe. Everything seemed to spin around me. The pain, the anger, and the confusion made me feel like I was about to collapse. I wanted to throw the phone away, wanted to run away to escape these thoughts, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave without answers. So I had no choice but to wait for him to come back, to wait until I could confront him face to face and ask the questions I couldn't wait to ask. The days that followed, I still couldn't escape the painful thoughts of what I had discovered. Every time I looked at my son, I realized I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. My son was my only joy right now. But I also knew I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I felt exhausted, drained, as if everything around me was falling apart. With each passing day, I found it harder to control my emotions. I couldn't keep hiding this tension, especially with him still away. I could only wait, but that waiting became heavier than ever before. My husband was still in Japan, and I could only look at the iPad and his phone like someone trapped in a game I couldn't escape from. Finally, one morning, while I was preparing breakfast for my son, I received a call. I looked at the screen and saw my husband's name. My heart skipped a beat, but I couldn't pick up immediately. I was filled with confusion and worry. Did he know that I had discovered his secret? Would he feel guilty and explain everything? Or would he continue to stay silent and lie to me once again? I took a deep breath and decided to answer. When I heard his voice, I couldn't hide the tension in my own voice. He greeted me normally, as if everything were still the same, but I knew deep down that everything had changed. He asked about our son, about what was going on at home, and I responded briefly, not wanting to say more. There were no questions from me about his business trip, about work, or anything else. At that moment, I just wanted him to come back immediately so that I could confront him and ask him everything directly. The tension stretched throughout the conversation. He didn't mention Vivian, and I didn't want to bring it up directly. I stayed silent, listening to him talk about his work and the things he had done in Japan. It felt like everything he said didn't matter anymore. Each word he spoke only pushed me further away, deepening the uncertainty about what he was really thinking and feeling. When the call ended, I stood there motionless, the anxiety, disappointment, and inner turmoil swelling within me. He hadn't said anything about what I had discovered, and I was more certain than ever that he was hiding something. Did he really care about our family? Or was all of this just a facade to cover up dark secrets? I couldn't keep living in this uncertainty. I needed to know the truth. I had to wait, but this time I wouldn't let silence hide it any longer. Finally, after a long flight and days of waiting, he came home. I could feel the tension in the air as soon as he walked through the door. He smiled at our son, asked about everything at home, as if nothing had changed. But I knew deep down that nothing was the same anymore. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't live in this confusion, letting doubts drag on. He might think everything was over, but for me, everything was just beginning. After dinner, when our son had gone to bed, I knew it was time to face him. I couldn't wait any longer. I had lived in tension all week, and now I wouldn't let him continue hiding the truth. I stood up from my chair, walked toward him, my eyes locked on his, unable to hide my anger and disappointment. He seemed to sense something was wrong, but still tried to keep a calm expression. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold and determined. He looked at me for a moment, as if guessing what I was about to say, but then he nodded, and we sat down across from each other. "Do you have something you want to explain?" I asked, each word falling from my mouth like heavy stones. He stayed silent for a moment, as if looking for the right words. I couldn't bear the silence any longer. I couldn't stay calm. "How could you do this to me? When you were on your business trip, I found the messages, the notes you wrote. You thought I didn't know?" I couldn't hold back any longer, the questions pouring out like a storm. "Who is Vivian?" He looked at me, his eyes suddenly clouded. It wasn't regret, it was hesitation, as if he knew he couldn't hide anymore. You don't understand," he started, his voice shaking a bit. "I don't know what to say to you, but this is a difficult situation. I don't know how to explain it." I waited, but he still didn't say anything else. My eyes lit up when I realized that, finally, he was starting to admit something. But what he was about to say was not easy. "I've done wrong, and I know it," he continued, his face heavy. "But I didn't know how to handle it when everything started to go wrong. Vivian, she's a part of my life that you don't know about. I didn't want to hurt you." At that moment, it felt like I was being doused with cold water. He was talking about a relationship I had no idea existed, a relationship I never thought would be part of our lives. I felt my heart squeeze. I didn't want to hear anymore, but I knew I had to listen to every word he said to understand the whole story. And now I understood that my life, our life, would never be simple again.